I think it's a good reminder for everybody to stay as vigilant as they can.
It was one of the few places Portland's homeless could go and feel safe. Now, Union Gospel Mission is a COVID hotspot.
We're confident we'll get through it.
Protesters, more and more, are trading in city streets with individual homes. So we asked someone who studies social movements whether that could backfire.
That's the kind of thing that has always been a part of protest culture.
And no, your ears aren't deceiving you. To the many, many, many people who can't stand our regular theme music, you're welcome. Here's the story.
I like it. I like it. I'm Dan Haggerty. Hi. This is The Story. You are currently kind of bobbing your head and swaying a little bit to the sweet sounds of Pink Martini bassist Phil Baker. So Phil apparently watches the show. Hopefully he's watching tonight. Hey, he composed tonight's theme music and is letting us try it on for size. I know there are a lot of you that are just devastated to hear that. You miss the old music so much. But nothing else is really going to change tonight, including the ways that you can talk to us. So you can see at the bottom of your screen, use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. You can email the story at kgw.com. We're on Instagram too. I'm not sure if you knew that. We're posting cool stuff all the time. Hop on there and give us a follow. So happy 4th day of Thanksgiving leftovers. How about it? Now, turkey only gets drier the longer it's in the fridge, but gravy and cranberry sauce fixes everything. And that's actually true for most things in life. But let's start tonight with dessert. We'll double back for the sustenance. A viewer named Kathy Dalton asked us over the weekend, hey Dan, so were there any citizen-on-citizen reports over too many Thanksgiving guests? The $1 million question, or should we call it the $1,250 question, since that is how much the state could fine you for breaking the freeze rules. Now, Governor Brown, you remember this, she even encouraged people to go ahead and call the cops on their neighbors if they're having a big family dinner.
Do you want people calling the police on their neighbors, not emergency lines or 911?
Look, this is no different than what happens if there's a party down the street and it's keeping everyone awake. What do neighbors do? They call law enforcement because it's too noisy.
So that could be a yes.
Yes, yes.
It's a juicy story, really, honestly. However, after all the build-up to the big day, Portland's emergency dispatch says that very few people actually narked on their neighbors, though some did. 10 in Portland. It was more than I thought we'd see, but 10 is the number to be specific in Portland. Washington County, they got another 2 there. Lake Oswego police got a call. In Marion County, deputies didn't respond to any reported violations. And right now, we're still waiting to hear if anybody actually got arrested or fined or anything like that, though I'm betting the answer is going to be no. That said, I'm sure that most people who canceled any big family plans did so for a different reason than the fears of SWAT belaying through their windows. I think that they canceled their plans because they didn't want to get sick, or they didn't want to get people sick. Now, not to sound too much like a broken record here, but in the days leading up to Thanksgiving, the warnings were loud and they were clear, and cases were already spiking. And Thanksgiving was shaping up to be this COVID-19 super spreader event in all 50 states. So personally, just to give you kind of a glimpse into my own life, and this only, counts for me, I'm not speaking for you, of course, I didn't actually know any person who had COVID prior to Thanksgiving. I'd only heard about, friends of friends. Now, in my personal life, I know several. And I know some people who are sweating bullets tonight because someone they celebrated with tested positive. Now, I'm wondering how many of you can relate to the way I'm feeling or they're feeling, or if you're surprised at all. Now, remember this too, Thanksgiving may be a big meal. I still feel a little swollen from mine, but it's only the appetizer of the holiday season. Christmas is less than a month away. And if you think people were protective over some turkey, just wait until Santa gets involved. Tonight's big story is all about a growing outbreak at a Portland homeless shelter. Now, as of tonight, 20 people are sick. Dozens more are stuck in quarantine. One person is in the hospital. And the timing of this is really important. It's important for 2 reasons. Number one, staff at the shelter learned about the first cases of COVID on Thursday, hours after their big Thanksgiving celebration. Now, they tailored that event there to meet all the standard COVID protocols, but still, we're talking about a lot of face-to-face interactions there. Now, number two, as you know, it's getting colder and colder outside. And the closer we get to winter, the more our leaders are going to be trying to get people who are living on the streets here in Portland off the streets and inside somewhere warm where they can take shelter. And it's all happening during a pandemic. Here's Maggie Vespa.
Dozens of residents and staff members here at Portland's Union Gospel Mission are just quarantining and waiting amid a growing COVID outbreak. A spokesperson told us what started with about 4 or 5 cases of COVID-19 last week has now ballooned to 20, and 1 staff member is in the hospital.
It's rough, and as you can imagine, I think emotions are up and down.
Courtney Dodds is the spokeswoman for Portland's Union Gospel Mission. She's also in quarantine herself amid the growing outbreak at the downtown shelter.
We are supporting each other as best we can, praying a lot.
It all started when 4 or 5 residents tested positive for COVID-19. It happened last week.
We found out on Thanksgiving evening.
Thanksgiving evening, hours after this scene played out front.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much.
Thursday, hundreds lined up in front of the mission for a hot Thanksgiving meal to go, a pandemic-friendly alternative to the shelter's annual sit-down banquet. Dodd says staff don't believe this event fueled the outbreak. Rather, the residents exposed are members of Life Change, the mission's inpatient addiction recovery program. Dodd says they all have mild symptoms and are quarantining here. All other operations within the shelter have shut down. Staff also closed other facilities, including the mission's thrift store in Tigard. All this in mind, Dodd says directors are confident in their ability to stop the spread. And she also notes that employee who was hospitalized is doing better.
We had a long phone call with the Oregon Health Authority and Multnomah County Health Department yesterday, and they affirmed that we're doing what we should with how we're handling things.
County health officials would know they've had more practice than the public realizes.
Is this the first outbreak at a shelter in Multnomah County thus far?
I would say no. We've had outbreaks in all kinds of congregate settings.
In light of this outbreak, I spoke to Multnomah County Health Officer Dr. Jennifer Vines and Mark Jolin, Director of the Joint Office of Homeless Services. They point out among people experiencing homelessness in Multnomah County, infection rates have remained relatively low. 82 people who identify as homeless have tested positive. Early on in the pandemic, officials feared that number would be much higher.
That's why we have focused on making sure that we can remove the people who are particularly high risk out of congregate shelter settings into motel rooms, and spacing out those folks who are still in congregate settings as much as possible.
Officials believe those tactics have worked, which is why they plan to keep employing them as it gets colder. Right now, they're busy securing extra severe weather shelter sites so that when temperatures drop below freezing, they can bring more people inside while keeping them socially distant. That said, Dr. Vines points out general infection rates are surging, and keeping COVID out of any setting is getting harder.
We do have the power to change the trajectory of this virus. It is exquisitely sensitive to individual human behaviors. And so I don't want to make it sound like it's inevitable. That said, we're at such high levels of community transmission at this moment that unfortunately I'm not surprised to see outbreaks.
Maggie Vespa, KGW News.
Protester tactics, all right, they have changed in the last few months on both ends of the spectrum. So instead of massive demonstrations, you know, the ones we've seen, or clashes, or things that are kind of choking off the streets in downtown Portland, we're seeing more of this. So the Oregonian reports about 50 protesters from the right-wing group Patriot Prayer demonstrated yesterday at a single home in Silverton. The person who lived in that home is an Oregon workplace safety regulator and happened to be the very same person who fined a gym $90,000 for violating Governor Brown's 2-week freeze. Then on the other side of the aisle, we had this demonstration earlier this month at Portland Commissioner Dan Ryan's home. Left-wing protesters, they weren't happy that Ryan voted against cutting more of the police budget, so they vandalized his house. They broke windows at his home. Not to mention, you know, all the cases of protests that we've seen kind of moving out of the downtown area and into neighborhoods, into residential places where families live. It got us wondering whether these kinds of targeted protests are effective for the cause, or if they could eventually backfire. So I asked a guy who literally studies this stuff, PSU professor Dr. Mark Rodriguez. Here's some of our conversation.
That's a tried and true tactic of protesters. Going back to open housing protests in the 60s and votes for women in the early 20th century, they often went to the houses of the people they wanted to convince to do something, right? And So I think that's the kind of thing that has always been a part of protest culture. What's different is when somebody smashes a window or destroys property on the site. And that's, I think, the kind of thing we saw at Mr. Ryan's house, where he and his partner were pretty scared.
Now, at that point, Dr. Rodriguez said that is where it turns into something that's not normal. The vandalism and the damage, like we saw 2 weeks ago when protesters smashed windows up and down Sandy and Hawthorne in Portland. But he also says it's often counterproductive to what activists are trying to do for the cause. And he thinks it says something bigger about the state of these protest movements we're witnessing.
Well, I think what it might be a sign of is the unraveling of the movement here in Portland. It doesn't seem to have the focus that it had during Black Lives Matter. It doesn't seem to have the focus that it had during sort of what I would call anti-Trump protests. Now that Trump has, although he hasn't conceded, it's pretty clear he lost the election. And so I think that those kinds of things mean that on the, I would say, left or self-described progressive side of things, there's a little bit of a lack of clarity. It's uncertain what they plan to do. And I think that most of the elected officials here in Portland support police reform. So it seems to me that they have perhaps one of the most progressive group of elected officials, and protesting against them in this way that resorts to violence and the destruction of property probably is not going to help them very much.
Explain to me why you think, and I'm sure it's based on your viewings of other protests in the past, but why do you think that those little markers indicate that the movement could be losing steam here?
Well, I think one of the things that I've always wondered about here in Portland was the degree to which these are autonomous movements without really clear leadership. There are certainly leaders. There are people that will speak to you as a leader, but we don't have the kind of coordinated effort. Like I mentioned in the past, we didn't have, and we don't have the kind of self-policing. So for example, when an elected official's home is picketed, there's nobody there that seems to have the authority to tell people, please don't damage property. And I think that we're now seeing that in the sort of scattered protests that don't seem to be part of a single narrative for reform. And that's, to me, I think a result of the fact that leaderless movements are great at creating flash mobs. They're less effective at creating sustained narratives of protest over time.
And Dr. Rodriguez explains it pretty simply, how these violent protests can backfire on the demonstrators. For example, if protesters are targeting Mayor Wheeler, but they're also damaging his home, neighbors who may have been allies to the cause may not just be turned off by the tactics, but end up having sympathy for the mayor and his neighbors. Okay, so we're going to take a break right now. Here's a quick look at what's coming up next, along with the smooth sounds of Phil Baker of Pink Martini.
When the story continues. If someone ever tells you, you play like a girl, just say, well, thank you.
Honestly, it's just so exciting.
This weekend, the first woman played in a Power 5 football game, but she wasn't the first to hit the gridiron. In fact, the first time a woman scored in a college football game,
she's been practicing all week,
was in Oregon.
Welcome back to the story. Lots of people writing in talking about the music, which I love. Thank you. Keep the conversation alive during the show. On your screen, you can see all the ways. Just grab your phone. Use the hashtag HeyDan. Email the story at kgw.com. You can give us a follow on Instagram. We check those messages throughout the show as well. Maybe I'll read some of your comments at the end. All right, let's talk about sports for a minute. Anybody catch the Broncos game yesterday? They didn't have any quarterbacks, which I'm not sure if you're huge football fans or not, but that's a pretty important position. All the quarterbacks had to be quarantined because of COVID exposure. So a wide receiver on the practice squad had to fill in, and it didn't go well. Now on Saturday, a college team had to do something similar, but it worked out a lot better for them. All the Vanderbilt kickers had to go into quarantine. So the goalie for the women's soccer team stepped in. Sarah Fuller made history as the first woman to play in one of the Power 5 conferences. I just love that moment where I wish I was there when she got the call. They handed her the helmet. They were like, get in there. I love it. I just love this story. But we have to remember that she's not the first woman to play in a college football game. That actually happened right here in Oregon in 1997. So let's take a look back in the KGW vault.
Liz Heaston will line up at the 10-yard line. The nation is watching and listening. The soccer player from Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. She's ready. She's been practicing all week. The snap is low. Joey sets it down. It's up. The flag's fly. It's good, but there's a flag on the field.
I think you're going to get offside the left field, so that baby's going to count.
No pressure. How about the pressure of that kick? That's Liz Heaston from Willamette. She became the first woman to play and score in a college football game. She got called up because other kickers were injured. And like they said, the nation was watching this. You see, she ended up on the Today Show with Katie Couric.
In fact, I don't even remember kicking the ball. I remember the snap and the hold and when it went through the uprights, but I don't remember in between.
You ever tried to kick a field goal? Next time you're out by a football field, try. It's like not easy. So Heaston, who also played soccer for Willamette, ended up playing in 2 football games for the Bearcats. Joe Ranieri talked to her today about that historic moment 23 years ago.
What was that like? What was your emotions going through?
Well, I mean, I didn't have a lot of time to think about it, fortunately. I mean, I had worked, being a collegiate athlete, you work the mental side of things on a regular basis. And so just working that mental side of things to get you prepared to be able to do that. And literally I went from, I finished a soccer game. I played that game, got in the van, changed clothes in the van, went out onto the field, and it was the second quarter. And I kicked in the second quarter. I mean, literally, it was that fast. And so, I mean, just like any other athletic thing that happens quickly, I mean, you get the adrenaline rush, you got, all the things, but I had a great team. I had great support. I mean, that's the thing. When you look back on it, I mean, I had a great coach. I had great coaching staff. I had great team members on both sides. So, I mean, I think we stand on the shoulders of giants. Truly, there are women much bigger than us who have done much bigger things before us. Did Title IX not exist, that would not have ever happened.
She's also a great athlete. I think that played a role. But it's so cool speaking to her today. That was great to hear from her. Willamette, she started kind of a trend. They recently had a couple of other female kickers, Kaylin Steerton in 2017 and Kyla Gordon in 2019. All right, let's talk about the weather. The weather's been beautiful, which is nice. I think we all needed it over the holiday. But when you look at the mountains, I mean, blanketed in snow. It's beautiful for skiers and snowboarders. Opening day at Meadows today. Matt Zaffino joining us now. I know you're pumped up for it, but it's different this year. People need something to do, and man, the mountains are delivering.
It is different this year for sure. Just to dovetail on that last story, Dan, there's also a female, at least a couple of years ago, a female place kicker on the San Barlow High School team here in the Portland area, out in Gresham. I know that because I was doing live shots out there a couple of years ago for their home game, and there was a female kicker in the high school ranks in Oregon, so that we may be hearing more about that. All right, back to the mountain we go. It was beautiful. I skied on Friday. Now, Timberline opened Wednesday of last week. This is video I shot on Friday. You can see the Bluebird Day that we had. Then we have a whole lot of that coming our way. But it is different this year, you're right. Now, this is me and my family on the chairlift. Notice everybody is masked up, and that is absolutely a requirement at Timberline, at Meadows, Mount Bachelor, which opens a week from today. You have to stay masked up, and they had people at the lift lines. If you showed up in the lift line and got inside the ropes and you weren't wearing your mask, they were like, hey, please put a mask on. And they were polite but firm about it, trying to keep everybody safe, as they very well should be. So it will be different. There are no single lines this year, meaning you have to ride either by yourself or with family members or people that you came up to the mountain with. So social distancing absolutely required while skiing, but when you're skiing, it's pretty easy to put a face covering on. It helps to keep you warm. I had a balaclava on, also a face mask, and you can see my family did the same thing there. And yes, Timberline also celebrating their new Poochie chairlift, which opened this year too. All right, let's take up on the mountain right now. That's live from Timberline, 22 degrees. There's 8 inches of new snow up there right now. These are the passes. Lots of snow in the passes. The passes are snowy tonight. There's Sandia Pass. Good snow shower bombing on through there right now, so we'll get a few more inches. Same thing down at Willamette Pass. So we're off to a great start for our ski season. We had a very healthy snowpack in November. Now for the next week, there is no new snow on the way, but December begins with more bluebird days. That's what skiers call those clear blue skies with the white snow, of course. It's just stunning. We'll have the strong winds up there early in the week. This is what it looked like today up at Mount Hood Meadows. Our photographer Ken McCormick went up there and shot some video, and people we're stoked. The stoke is high. That's what I hear from Morgan Romero. The stoke is high. And as I said, enjoying all that new snow up there, Dan. But yes, it is different this year with the COVID requirements. The resorts all taking it seriously, but everybody's bundled up. A lot of the resorts are suggesting, hey, plan on eating your lunch at your car, put your boots on at your car, try not to go into the lodge at all. They do have some limited capacity there, but it will be different, but still fun and a great, great escape for everybody suffering through the COVID blues.
You said it. I was wondering where the stoke level was, so I'm glad to hear it's high.
Way high.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Thank you. And you mentioned he mentioned Ken McCormick, our photographer, had that money assignment today to head up on the mountain. So he talked to a few people. Let's see what he found out.
First day. I'm pretty excited about this. Left at 6 a.m. Here we are.
This is awesome, bro.
Oh man, it's amazing. It's really windy and really snowy, lots of powder, and it's beautiful.
Feels good to get back up on the snow. I mean, I haven't skied since March, and I can't believe how good it is on the first day.
This is one of the best openings that we've had. So far, things moving really smooth. And, you know, we've been working and working and working with our COVID operational plan to keep everybody masked up and spread out and able to enjoy the mountain.
I think they're working through all the issues with COVID real well, and we're going to have a really good season.
I've never actually seen it have this much snow this early, so I think that this is super exciting.
There's fresh for everybody today, and it's going to last all day.
Got more than usual this time of year, and we're going to hopefully just keep getting more throughout the season. I'm really excited. Everyone is.
It already looks amazing. Full powder. Awesome. Way to go.
I'm not sitting here typing on an Excel spreadsheet, so this is definitely a win. You can't tell, but I'm smiling underneath this mask. It's good out there.
Oh, I'm so excited. I've been waiting for this all year. Best part of 2020.
Best part of 2020. I don't know that that's a very difficult goal to hit. That said, if you're listening to us right now, if you're a long time is there a long time story viewer? We've only been on for less than a year, but if you've been watching us since the beginning, you probably recognize our music a little different. Pink Martini's bassist Phil Baker composed some original music for us tonight. And after the break, we're going to read some of your feedback and listen to some more music from Phil.
What takes me the time? All the gigs are gone, and I got no pay, All I do is walk, stay 6 feet away, Now the kids
Enjoy having that stuck in your head for the next week. The muse behind tonight's music, Pink Martini bassist Phil Baker and friends, nailing a quarantine rendition of California Dreamin' by the Mamas and Papas. You can see Phil slapping the bass down there in the bottom left corner. Their version called Guess I'll Just Be Streamin'. You can probably guess by the title and the lyrics. It's all about how music gigs have pretty much dried up during the time of COVID. So be sure to support your favorite local artists however you can. And we want to thank Phil so much tonight for sharing his music with us and our viewers. People, a resounding love for it on social media, using Hey Dan and emailing us tonight, which is a shocker that somebody from one of the most successful bands in the history of this state has made music that's better than one We Went Like This on a playlist. Yeah, that one sounds pretty good. So, not a shocker. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to play your music. Mark Wegland wrote me at the very beginning of the show, said, what the heck's going on with your earpiece? I don't know. Thanks for the complex the entire show. We couldn't figure it out. So if you know what's going on with it or what you spotted, please let me know, because I can't, I'm like obsessed with what you said now. Tracy Turner, according to the food experts, unless you freeze the leftovers, you should not eat Thanksgiving food after Monday. I'm gonna have to look that up because I plan to eat it until next Monday. Is that wrong? I don't care. Ryan Lounsbury said, Popeye's Cajun turkey does not dry out in the fridge. It ages like a fine wine. And I hear it's best enjoyed with a fine wine. Thanks to everybody for writing in. Got a lot to talk about this week. It's just the beginning. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you tomorrow.